Have you ever wondered what goes on inside the mind of a wolf? You often see them as fierce, untamable predators, the villains of fairy tales. But what if I told you a story about a wolf that will completely change how you see them? Story of unbelievable courage, a surprising bond, and an ending that will leave you speechless. Stick around because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Deep in the sprawling, snow-covered forests of the northern Rockies, a lone wolf roamed. We'll call him Kai. He wasn't the alpha, not the biggest or the strongest in his pack. In fact, he was a bit of an outcast, often keeping to the fringes during a hunt, content with the scraps left behind. His pack, led by a formidable alpha named Boris, was known for its strength and dominance in the territory. They were a force of nature, perfectly adapted to the harsh wilderness. But Kai was different. He was quieter, more observant. He'd spend hours watching the clouds drift by or studying the intricate patterns of frost on a leaf. One brutal winter, the snow fell deeper and the air grew colder than anyone could remember. Game became scarce. The deer and elk herds moved to lower, less accessible valleys, and the pack grew hungry and desperate. Tensions ran high. Boris, the alpha, became more aggressive, his patience worn thin by the gnawing hunger. The pack's hunts were failing, one after another. Morale was at an all-time low. The younger wolves whimpered from hunger, and the elders looked on with weary, sunken eyes. It seemed the great forest itself was testing them, pushing them to their absolute limit. During this time of hardship, something truly unexpected happened. A young grizzly bear, barely more than a cub, had been separated from its mother. It was alone, confused, and starving. A grizzly cub, even a young one, is still a formidable creature, but in this unforgiving winter, it was just another desperate soul trying to survive. One day, the pack cornered the cub near a frozen river. For the hungry wolves, this was a potential meal, a life-saving opportunity. Boris led the charge, his lips curled back in a snarl. The pack closed in, a circle of gray specters against the white snow. The cub, terrified, let out a heart-wrenching cry, a sound of pure fear and desperation. And that's when Kai did something no one could have predicted. As the pack lunged, Kai broke rank. He didn't attack the cub. Instead, he leaped in front of it, standing between the terrified young bear and his own hungry pack. He bared his teeth, not at the cub, but at Boris, the alpha. A low, rumbling growl echoed from his chest. It was an act of outright defiance, a challenge to the pack's leader, and a certain death sentence in the rigid hierarchy of wolves. The other wolves stopped in their tracks, utterly stunned. Boris, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief, stared down his subordinate. The air crackled with tension. Why would Kai risk everything for an enemy, a competitor for their dwindling resources? The standoff was intense. Boris lunged at Kai, a blur of fur and teeth. The two wolves clashed in the snow, a violent, desperate struggle. Kai was no match for the alpha's raw power, but he fought with a ferocity no one had ever seen in him before. He wasn't fighting for dominance. He was fighting for the life of the small creature cowering behind him. He took slash after slash, his fur matted with blood, but he refused to back down. Every time Boris tried to get past him to the cub, Kai threw himself in the way. The rest of the pack just watched, confused and mesmerized by this display of insane courage from the quiet outcast. Finally, weakened and bleeding, Kai was thrown to the side. Boris stood over him, ready to deliver the final killing bite. But then, another sound cut through the cold air. A deafening roar. It was the mother grizzly. Drawn by her cub's cries, she had finally found him. She burst from the tree line like an avalanche, a mountain of fury and maternal instinct. The wolves, including the powerful Boris, knew they were no match for a full-grown, enraged grizzly. They scattered in an instant, melting back into the forest, leaving the wounded Kai alone in the snow. The mother bear rushed to her cub, nuzzling it and checking it for injuries. The cub was safe. She then turned her massive head and looked at Kai, who lay bleeding and broken on the ground. He had saved her child. Here is where the story takes a turn you won't believe. Instead of finishing off the wounded wolf, the mother grizzly did something extraordinary. She gently nudged Kai with her enormous snout. Then she stood guard over him. For the next 2 days, as a blizzard raged, the mother bear and her cub stayed by Kai's side. She protected him from the freezing wind with her own body, and even brought him a piece of a carcass she had scavenged, dropping it near his head. It was an act of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the wolf's sacrifice. An ancient truce between two rival species, brokered by an act of selfless courage. Slowly, Kai began to heal under the bear's unlikely protection. His pack had abandoned him, leaving him for dead. But he had found a new temporary family in the most unexpected of allies. Once the blizzard passed and Kai was strong enough to stand, the mother grizzly and her cub gave him one last look before lumbering off into the forest. Kai was alone again, but he was alive, and he was changed. He was no longer the timid outcast. He had faced down his own alpha and survived the wrath of a grizzly. He had discovered a strength within himself he never knew he had. Now, you might think the story ends there, with our hero wolf wandering off to live a solitary life. But this is where the ending truly gets unbelievable. Kai didn't just wander off. He tracked his old pack. It's not for revenge, but because he was still a wolf, and a wolf's instinct is to belong. When he finally found them, they were in a dire state. Their failed hunt for the cub had left them even weaker. Another larger rival pack had smelled their weakness and was moving in to claim their territory. A fight was brewing, and Kai's pack was in no condition to win. Boris, the alpha, was injured from his own recent struggles. He saw Kai approach and prepared for a final, fatal challenge. But Kai didn't challenge him. Instead, he stood beside him, facing the approaching rivals. His presence, his story of survival, his unbelievable tale that had surely spread through the forest's whispers, seemed to inspire the pack. They saw not an outcast, but a survivor, a hero. Bolstered by his return, the pack rallied. When the rival pack attacked, they fought with renewed spirit. And Kai, fighting side by side with Boris, was a whirlwind of controlled, strategic fury. Together, they drove off the intruders and saved their territory. After the battle, a new order was established. Boris, humbled and respecting Kai's incredible journey, did not kill him. Instead, in a move that shocked the very foundations of wolf law, he shared leadership. Kai, the quiet observer, became a new kind of leader, one who led not through brute force, but through intelligence, observation, and a courage that defied instinct. He had taught his pack that there was more to strength than just fangs and claws. It was about compassion, about unexpected alliances, about the courage to protect the vulnerable, even when it's not your own. So the next time you think of a wolf, don't just picture a predator, picture Kai, a wolf who defied his own nature to save an enemy, who earned the respect of a grizzly bear, and who ultimately redefined what it means to be a leader. His story reminds us that courage can be found in the quietest of souls, and that the most powerful bonds can be forged in the most unlikely of circumstances. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story. If it touched you as much as it touched me, please hit that like button, subscribe for more amazing tales from the wild, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes. See you in the next one.